I think he's a really good coach. That manager, he's just remarkably unfazed, I think, and rightly should be lauded for where they are in the table right now.
Right, I'm here with EFL striker and EFL pundit Sam Parkin. Sam, I want to pick your brains on managers, and the word I want to use is overperforming because it's very easy to give credit to the managers who are at the top of the divisions, but more often than not, we know league positions lines up with finances in football, and sometimes there's actually with context equally or even better jobs being done elsewhere. So I wanted to pick out some of what you would consider the overperforming managers currently in the EFL. What I'm going to do, I'll throw three at you per division, but if you want to add in others or debunk one of mine, feel free, and
All
then
right.
we can maybe get towards the best performing pound for pound managers in the EFL. So I had a quick scan down the championship, and the three that came out were John Dahl Tomasson, which is a tricky one because the team's very quirky and very weird. But for Blackburn to be third in the championship now, whether they'll finish there, you might want to consider in your response. And then I had two teams I predicted to be relegated who were doing much better, which would be Reading and Birmingham. So Paul Ince and John Eustace. And that, I guess, is a bit of a sense of everyone looking at the clubs at the start of the season and thinking, oh, this doesn't look good. And then in Birmingham's case, some really good recruitment and a nice solid plan. And in Reading's case, just everybody really underestimating Paul Ince a little bit and nice solid home record, difficult side to play against. So those are my three. What's your take on anything I've said? And is there anybody I've missed out who you'd put in terms of overperforming championship managers?
It's tremendous. I've got two different teams to you already there, Ben.
Excellent. Let's do it.
So Paul Ince was one of yours, yeah. I'd completely concur with that. I think unanimously across the board, everyone who critiques
Panned.
the critiques the EFL, um, watches EFL football would have had them down as relegation certainties. So I've seen them in the flesh a few times. It's a little bit feast or famine, isn't it? Sometimes they've been absolutely spanked this season, but the powers of recovery seem really strong. And I think that is probably down to the environment, as cheesy and as wishy-washy as it sounds. Paul Ince doesn't seem to get too bothered with the victories or too despondent when they've been pumped, for a Scottish word that is, for a heavy beating. So yeah, I've always felt that Reading have got real individual talent. I still think some of those players persist at the top end of the pitch, and that's without really seeing the best of Ajaria and Jow and people like that this season. But Tom Ince has had a sensational season, and yeah, I think having seen them and having a lot, seen quite a lot of his post match stuff, he's done a really good job, Paul Ince, and rightly should be lauded for where they are in the table right now. I suppose Birmingham's similar in terms of the outlook at the start of the season.
No embargo at Birmingham for Eustace that Ince has got at
Mm,
Reading, to be fair. And that, to get Chong and Hannibal and
yeah.
Trusty has really helped him. But he's done a great job as well, hasn't he?
No, that's a game changer. I would say watching Cardiff and Birmingham in the job that we do has been the toughest test of my love for the Championship and the lower leagues over the last few years. And I think Talk Sport it is who quite often send me to Wales. Probably think that it's quite a nice straight run for me down the M4. I'm not complaining here, but watching Warnock under Cardiff under Warnock and Harris and was a tough gig.
And
Um,
Mick after as well.
yeah, it was a tough gig. Sorry, I've digressed a little bit here, but I put Birmingham in that same category.
Right.
Whenever I got to watch a Birmingham game, I'd like, oh my goodness me. And I know John really well, John Eustace. We lived about 100 yards from each other when I was playing for Luton and he was at the enemy Watford. And he's an incredibly driven individual. We're still in contact and he used to hook me up for tickets at QPR. Never gives a lot away, incredibly meticulous. When he was at Watford during that period, he'd been cast aside. And I thought this is a real good example of his character. And I think it was Brendan Rodgers at the time. It may have been Sean Dyche, but Eustace was training with the youngsters. They wanted him out of the club essentially, and he completely turned that around just out of pure desire, incredible professionalism, and I think you can see a lot of that in his management. He's very driven, very focused, but you're bang on. That was a turgid watch, Birmingham, the last few years. So reliant on slinging one in the box and hoping Jukovic could produce something. Now they've got through the spine of the team where they've got quality in the forward areas with the guys you mentioned. They've got that.
I didn't mention Bielik either.
Yeah, Bielik and Hannibal gives them unbelievable quality in the middle of the pitch as well. Trusty's been an inspired signing. The shape hasn't altered too much, but yeah, I think you're bang on. They've just stuttered a little bit, haven't they? And it seems to be down to Hogan's omission.
Strangely. That's another one where he was considered, maybe going to go on somewhere else, and now the only player who can run in behind, important player for him.
Yeah, definitely. And I would have felt probably that Hogan, Deeney and Jukovic probably wasn't strong enough anymore, but it's proved to have its merits. And Hogan's been a miss recently. But yeah, no, I'd completely echo that. I hope they can, get back on an upward trajectory because I got a lot of time for Eustace. He's a really good guy.
Who are the other two then?
Well, these two obvious. I've got Sunderland.
Okay.
And Millwall.
Should have. I did a blooming video on Millwall yesterday. So Sunderland, Mowbray hasn't been in long, has he? But they're just, I think, seventh at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think it's quite simplistic again, but to navigate that period without the strikers, and I think to be flexible enough to actually play a number 9, play a false 9, play these attacking midfielders in forward roles. I think that shows. He probably gets labelled to be a little bit old-fashioned, Tony Mowbray. I know.
Oh no, he's smart. Yeah,
he's a smart. Yeah, I think so. I think because he's a good guy, isn't he? And he's a real good man manager. He's good for sound bites and all that. I think he would have been brilliant to play for. I think some of his tactical acumen probably gets lost, but I think we've seen that this season. And it sounded like from the outside, I don't know about you, but that Alex Neil wasn't too enamoured with the transfer business. And actually, some of these guys that they've signed, obviously Ahmed from United, some of the guys they signed from the continent, look to have a lot of quality. So they've got some good players as well. Ballard's been excellent as well since he's come back in. So I think he definitely deserves a shout after the success at Blackburn and continuing at a new club this year. And yeah, Gary Rowett, I think you see a lot of Millwall. I know, Ben, I've watched some of your videos previously. I think it's one of the toughest jobs in football, honestly.
So you played there as well, didn't you?
I played there and it went really well because we had a brilliant team. So I only saw the good of Millwall and I love going there. I've got some family members who are season ticket holders, bizarrely, there. And because we're not from that neck of the woods. And I think it's such a tough job because managers have tried and failed before to make the football a bit different in terms of playing through the thirds a bit more, and they failed miserably. And Gary Rowett seems to be striking the right tune. And it's for me doing my research and watching it like I do, it feels like it's just since they've taken the handbrake off a little bit and introduced an extra forward player. I mean, this run, I think it started 13 or 14 games ago. They've only lost twice.
2 defeats in 14, yeah.
Yeah, which is incredible. And I always felt if they don't score from a set piece, where are they going to get goals from? They can't really control games because they don't have the midfield players that are able to keep possession and wind the clock down. It was almost like, right, we'll go all in, try and get 2-3-0 up and just hold on for dear life. Where I think that's evolving a little bit at Millwall. They're getting better players. And it'd be interesting to see what they do in this window because they're having let Afobe leave.
Yeah, they've freed up a couple of spots. There's a lad gone to Stockport as well. So you'd imagine there's a forward coming in at some point, wouldn't you?
Definitely. Yeah, as good as Bradshaw's been in kind of flashes, that right-hand side, I think, because I've seen them live recently on a couple of occasions, they've had Bury, Honeyman or Bennett kind of in there. And I think that's the one position that's a little bit up for grabs at the moment. So if someone can come in and maybe occupy that position and play as a central striker, A or another, then they could have a chance this year because they've been around it, haven't they? And I really like Gary. I don't know if you've met him before or spent time with him, but when I met him, he was really open and honest, and I did a couple of shows with him, and he was quite openly saying to me that he's quite a pragmatic manager, and when he had to go for interviews and such like, they want a PowerPoint about your philosophy and your style of football and all that now. And Gary said, if he was completely truthful, we'd go in there and say, like, I set up not to lose, really. So I think this is a manager who, I don't know if it's out of necessity, the pressure of the crowd, but he's evolved, I think. And this is, it's a Mill side that still have that kind of hard working ethic, power from set pieces, but the forward players, there's a lot more craft and guile there now. So I think he's doing a brilliant job.
Brilliant stuff. And yeah, for those people who are going to cry who might support top six teams, again, we're talking about overperforming managers here. So yes, we know Vincent Kompany's done a brilliant job at Burnley, of course, and Paul Heckingbottom continues, but maybe some credit for the teams that aren't necessarily the financial powerhouses broadcast money wise is what we're trying to do here. In League One, though, Sam, I can't not have one of the teams at the top, purely because Plymouth are just that points number and the fact that there's a Ipswich, Wednesday, Bolton, Derby, who would all arguably be bigger clubs around them. So I've got to have Stephen Schumacher in. And I think on the telly the other day, you said he got 100 points in a year or something, which is, as a manager, which is just absurd. Then I've gone for Joey Barton, and this may change to Darryl Clark or Gary Caldwell, but not necessarily Gary Caldwell because he took over from Matt Taylor. But he's the top of the promoted managers at the moment, Barton. And I know you like their attack and how they go for games. And then right now I've got to go for Derek Adams because that's another one down at Morecambe where not necessarily the most stable off the pitch, looked like they were adrift. And you talk about managers being just the same in every interview all the way through, exactly the same. Now they've started winning exactly the same and out of the bottom three. And if he keeps, maybe Plymouth winning the division or Bristol Rovers getting in the playoffs would supplant that. But if he keeps Morecambe in there, that would be a hell of a job, I think. What is your take on my three picks? Have you got any matches and have you got any others you want to shout out?
Yeah, I'd scribbled Joey Barton down. I think he's a really good coach, to be honest, and that's thinking back to his Fleetwood side as well. I think there's been examples of him over complicating things at times this season. Obviously, a few contentious quotes, which par the course.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, there was stuff with the Cowleys and then most recently with Gareth Ainsworth, which was a little bit sore. But I think he knows what he's doing. And like you said, they've got real talented front players. So they'll have a chance. If not this year, they'll have a chance of making it into the Championship. And it's a bit of a cliche, but I'd like to see the Bristol clubs thriving. I thought 3 or 4 years ago, Bristol City could possibly be on the cusp of getting into the Premier League. It's gone a little bit backwards, but it's two really well-supported clubs. So I would echo that. I did have 3 above him in the list. One, I think you may disagree with. I've got Scott Brown down there.
Good shout. Yeah, Fleetwood, yeah.
Fleetwood, yeah. Obviously, speaking on the back of them beating QPR, I would imagine, I know it's a well-run club and there probably is a decent enough budget there, good facilities, but I still think in his first role in England, he's doing a pretty good job. And this is with hindsight of seeing them in the flesh. He looks like a good coach. They look well coached. I really like the midfield player Warrington on loan from Everton. I don't know if you've had a chance to see him yet. He's a very clever footballer and everything seems to go through him. So I've been impressed with them. I did my coaching badges with him, and I was probably a bit judgmental going into it, thinking he was going to be the Scott Brown that you saw in the Old Firm derbies. But what I encountered was a really
hyper aggressive alpha male type. Yeah.
What I encountered was a really likable guy, good sense of humour, and even when we were doing the sessions and you're essentially walking through stuff and people are putting on different sessions. My goodness, he was a good footballer, and
Really?
I can see that brain that he had as the midfield orchestrator, everything going through him, seeing the passes, seeing the angles, seeing where people had to be. I can see that in his management. So I think he's worth a shout out at this time. And then two slightly more obvious ones. I think Michael Duff, again, in the infancy of a new gig. A lot of similarities to what he did at Cheltenham, I suppose, but to have them in touching distance of promotion is great.
And Sam, Barnsley were horrible last
Yeah,
season. 3 different managers, just horrible points total. So that really needed completely turning around, didn't it?
yeah, and I think having spoken people close to him, he's still got improvements that he can make. I think Michael Duff, I think he's quite emotional. I think he's quite an old-fashioned man manager as well, from what I'm led to believe. So it's probably a team effort there as well in terms of the coaching staff. But as a front man, as a voice, he looks like he's really got it. And he had that stellar career, but it was essentially at Cheltenham and Burnley, wasn't it? 2 clubs. I'm sure he was a huge voice in those dressing rooms and looks to have learnt off Steve Cottrell and obviously Sean Dyche. I think were his two main gaffers. So yeah, I really like the cut of his jib. And then the other one, which won't surprise you, Gareth Ainsworth, I think.
Right.
And I mean, I know they've had some indifferent results, but I think he's just continues to punch above his and their weight. Honestly,
What's your take on the snobbiness about Ainsworth and about the football?
well, yeah, I don't know if you were in the office the other day, but me and Hugh went at it a little bit about this. I think there was some credence. Is that the right word? I thought what Joey Barton said the other day, some of it he was actually correct about Gareth Ainsworth. That if Gareth's football was slightly different at Wycombe, if they played a little bit, listen, if they played square and played back a little bit more and had a bit more possession, he probably would have got his move now and probably would have got a championship job. And I think that was part of what Joey Barton was saying. Some of it was quite inflammatory and it was unnecessary after a defeat, but I tend to agree. And the biggest thing about Gareth Ainsworth, I think, is that unity. And again, it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but I've spoken to the lads there, and they adore playing for Wycombe and adore playing for him. And it was really evident to me that playoff final, the one that was behind closed doors. I went there against against Northampton.
Yes.
It feels like it was against Northampton, and I could hear their substitutes, their technical staff, cajoling the players through the 90 minutes. Oxford. It was just a great indication, example of how things are run there. The unity in that group. I know Dave Wheeler pretty well, and I've spoken to him about it. And I don't know if it translates to the higher level. Hopefully, for Gareth's sake, we'll get a chance to see. But I think they've got something incredibly unique there. I can't even really think of a comparison. To think of Wycombe, the club I played for, that was a few years out and not the non-league, but the way that it's run, it's not hugely supported. It's a close-knit club. To think that they've had a year in the Championship recently is just astonishing. And there is a consistency there to suggest that they may do it again.
Amazing. On to League Two. And again, it seems too obvious with Leyton Orient, doesn't it? So I'm going to leave that to one side. I've got to mention Steve Evans, not just on the basis of that Aston Villa win, but just I don't know how you feel. I know he's been supported in terms of salary, from what I understand, for the players, but to turn that around as quickly as he's done, given how he's in some ways perceived, I think is a brilliant job. Mm-hmm. I've gone for Pete Wild at Barrow. Yeah, I know they're a bit like, I think you said feast or famine about Blackburn. I think Barrow are a little bit the same, aren't they? And Matt Gray, I know he's on an upward climb now at Sutton, but I think they're back in the top half now. And you talk about punching your weight. That's That's ridiculous. What would be your response to those? And do we match up on any picks there?
Funny, isn't it? The lower you go down that division, the more jump out at you almost.
Right.
There's a number of clubs. I'd say from 11th to 13th, you could make a case for Walsall, Sutton, and, well, I'm being a bit biased towards Jacko considering the run they've been on, but certainly Walsall and Sutton United. If I think back to the start of the season, I would have felt that Walsall would have really struggled. And having had a year at the club, I know that the supporters have been so downbeat for so long at Walsall. So it's great to see improvements on and off the pitch. So I think they're definitely worth a shout. Yeah, Matt Gray, unquestionably. Again, watching them last year, similar to Wycombe to a degree, the organisation, the togetherness, not getting despondent when you get beaten or have a tricky run. That manager, he's just remarkably unfazed, I think. And given what they did last year, on the cusp of the playoffs for so long, EFL trophy final, to be in the position they are again this season, that's magnificent. And they're playing essentially the same way. They're always a man down in midfield. It takes incredible organisation, I think, in this day and age, not to get.
And Sam, have you thought as well? Oh, the toothpaste's out the tube. They're on a downward trend now, and he's got them going again, hasn't he?
Yeah, of course. I haven't got the stat in front of me, which is annoying. But I think all their victories, other than one, have come by the odd goal this season. And I thought I don't know what it says about them.
Game management,
yeah. Staying in games, fitness levels, changes from the bench, especially at home. Obviously, I think they're 4 from 4 most recently. So I thought that was I think that's quite a worthy stat to kind of try and make sense of why they're so good, really. And if I creep a little bit higher, I think definitely Barrow, Pete Wild. You'd still worry if it was going to be sustainable, but considering where they have been, he's done a terrific job. They've got some good forward players. They've got a set piece threat, and it's a very, very difficult place to go and play. It would seem. It would seem. I mean, are they 8 from 10 or 8 from 11 or something victories at home, which is
very good at home. Yeah,
astonishing shooting. And they started the season well. And off the top of my head, that Northampton game always jumps out to me, where they lost at Sixfields, but they played really well. And I think they left with a lot of credit. And I think I don't think they've been smashed too many times. They may have lost a few games, but I don't think they've been disgraced in any game this season. So yeah, absolute terrific job he's doing. Who else did you say?
Steve Evans.
Yeah, I definitely mention Northampton and Carlisle. Although my podcast mate Adrian Clark said that Northampton are wildly overperforming their XG. I think.
Are they?
I haven't got the stat in front of me. That's probably right. Sam Hoskins is wildly over.
Good. And Pinnock's very good on the set plays as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
So that might explain it away.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that is. I know they're terrifically organised, incredibly robust, defensively strong. I don't know how much this season is down to the manager or it's down to Sam Hoskins having an absolute worldie. And like you say, riding their luck a little bit. I think they're a good side. Stevenage, yeah, I think they've got good players, which helps, but they've got a manager who has got a clear identity, knows exactly how to win matches, doesn't care what people think about him. And I think it's a combination of those factors. I think it is important that he's put together a good squad. I've always really liked Sweeney at centre half. The front options, I've always liked Danny Rose, and I know that he had him previously at Mansfield. He's a really talented boy, Danny Rose, and I don't know why it hasn't worked out for him. I know Jamie Reid and I know Luke Norris, both of those guys, relatively well. And Luke's a talented front player, exactly what you want from a League Two player. I think he lacks self-belief, which I see a bit of me in him. I've interviewed him a few times, and I think you've got everything that you need really to be, a good lower league striker, and he's never really consistently done it. Steve Evans is getting the best out of them, and Jamie Reid as well. Regular game time. Jamie's lost his way a little bit after getting that move from Torquay to Mansfield, I think it was, and it didn't really happen for him. But when he got back in the league, but Jamie again is quick, strong, good ability, 2 good feet, and shouldn't probably be playing in League Two. So good players, and I think a manager above probably anyone in that league got the experience and got that set way of playing, which is so difficult to deal with.
Well, there you go, guys. There's probably 10 or 15 names there. So do get involved in the comments. Firstly, if there's anybody we've missed out. But remember, we're talking overperforming. So if you have the most money and you're top of the league, that's called par rather than overperformance. I can't stress that enough. But also, if you fancy it in the comments, if you want to give us a 1, 2, 3 across the EFL, I would love to see your responses. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. And Sam is actually going to be back later in the week, taking me on in the championship predictions. So hang around for that too.